A man stands alone in a supermarket aisle, murmuring to himself, "Milk! Where's the milk?" To anyone watching, he looks faintly unhinged. But here's what nobody watching him knows. In a psychology lab at the University of Wisconsin, this exact behavior was quietly proven to make people faster, sharper, and more accurate at finding what they're looking for. Say the object's name out loud while you search, and your eyes find it sooner. Not imagine it, not think it. Say it. And that tiny, almost embarrassing finding cracked open a question that has divided scientists for a century. Why do some of the most capable minds alive talk to themselves, out loud, like someone else is in the room? We're trained out of it early. A parent hears a 4-year-old narrating his own building blocks. This one goes here. No, that one, and gently tells him to keep it in his head. We treat it like a phase, something between babbling and real thinking, something you're supposed to outgrow. Except peer into the offices of physicists, novelists, chess grandmasters, surgeons mid-operation, and you find the exact same murmuring, not because their thinking broke down, because the evidence now suggests something was working exactly as it should. To understand why, you first have to see how strange human thought actually is. Right now, somewhere inside your skull, a voice is narrating your life, planning your afternoon, replaying an old argument, rehearsing what you'll say next. Scientists call this inner speech, and by some estimates it fills most of your waking hours. A conversation with an audience of one. Here's the unsettling part. That private monologue in your head and the audible mutter of a man hunting for his car keys might not be two different things at all. They might be the exact same mechanism, just caught at 2 different volumes. And the person who first proved that wasn't studying geniuses, he was studying toddlers. In the 1920s and 30s, Swiss psychologist Jean Piaget listened to children talk to themselves during play and concluded it was a flaw. Egocentric speech. Proof the child hadn't yet learned to separate their own mind from everyone else's. Something to be outgrown, like a limp that fixes itself. At almost the exact same time, on the other side of the world, a young Soviet psychologist named Lev Vygotsky was watching the same children and reaching the opposite conclusion. He'd noticed something Piaget missed entirely. The talking wasn't random. It got louder exactly when the task got harder. Give a child an easy puzzle, and they worked in silence. Give them a hard one, and the self-narration switched on, like a tool being pulled out of a drawer the moment it was actually needed. That was the first twist. Talking to yourself wasn't a breakdown of thinking. It was thinking, caught in the act, doing out loud what it normally hides. Vygotsky went further, and this is where it gets strange. He proposed that private speech never actually disappears as we grow up. It just goes underground. The child who once said, "Put the red one here," out loud eventually just thinks it. The words compress, shrink, fold inward, and become the inner voice you're using right now to read this sentence in your head. Which means your inner monologue isn't some higher adult faculty. It's a toddler's out-loud self-talk, miniaturized and hidden. And here's the part that should genuinely unsettle you. It doesn't stay hidden. Under enough pressure, it comes back out. Thread a needle. Parallel park in a tight spot. Push a mind right to the edge of what it can handle, and the whisper returns. Which brings us to the real question, the one the supermarket study only hinted at. Does talking to yourself actually make you think better, or is it just what struggling happens to sound like? The answer researchers found is stranger than either option. Psychologists studying children on hard tasks, including researcher Adam Winsler, found that the kids who talked to themselves more performed better, not worse. The self-talk wasn't the sound of a mind falling apart. It was a strategy. Breaking a problem into steps, holding instructions in place, catching a mistake before it snowballs. Now, here's where you need to pay close attention, because this is the part almost everyone gets wrong. The popular idea that talking to yourself is a sign of high intelligence isn't quite what the science says. There is no clean study proving self-talkers have higher IQs. What the research actually found is narrower, and honestly more interesting. Self-talk correlates with self-regulation, the ability to monitor, steer, and correct your own thinking while it's happening. That trait overlaps with what IQ tests partly measure, which is probably exactly how the myth got started. So the myth isn't wrong, exactly. It's just aimed at the wrong target. It was never raw brainpower muttering in the cereal aisle. It was a mind actively supervising itself. A completely different, and far more useful, superpower. which means this isn't a trait reserved for the gifted. It's a trait that shows up in anyone wrestling honestly with something hard. Surgeons narrate mid-procedure. Chess players mutter candidate moves under their breath. Writers read sentences aloud just to hear if they break. In every case, the voice isn't background noise. It's doing work, slowing the mind down just enough to catch what a faster, silent pass would have missed completely. And there's a layer to this even the researchers didn't see coming. Psychologist Charles Fernyha, who has spent years studying inner speech at Durham University, found that this internal narration isn't one consistent thing. Sometimes it's expansive, almost like full dictation. Other times it collapses into fragments, single words standing in for entire thoughts, a kind of mental shorthand. And strangest of all, it isn't always one voice. People report their inner speech shifting tone, even shifting perspective, as if the mind sometimes needs to argue with itself just to think straight. A single skull, containing not a monologue, but something closer to a dialogue. That idea alone unsettled a field that had assumed, for a century, that thought was one continuous stream. It also explains a trick that's now used far outside any laboratory. Psychologist Ethan Kross discovered that the language you use on yourself changes how well it works. Coaching yourself in the first person, "I can do this," is measurably weaker under stress than switching to the second or third person, using your own name, the way a coach would talk to someone else entirely. Distance produces calm. Your mind, it turns out, doesn't fully trust advice from the same panicking voice that's currently panicking. So the man in the supermarket aisle was never doing anything strange. He was doing, out loud, without a shred of self-consciousness, exactly what the rest of us do, silently 1,000 times a day. Narrating, checking, steering our own thoughts with language. Because language is the tool the mind reaches. For the moment, it has to think about its own thinking. Somewhere between a toddler talking to his toys and a surgeon murmuring through an incision sits the exact same mechanism, running at different volumes for the exact same reason. Not because a mind failed to stay quiet, but because, every so often, thinking out loud is simply how a mind gets the job done. So the next time you catch yourself mid-sentence, alone, with nobody there to hear it, that isn't a slip. That's your mind doing on the outside what it usually hides on the inside. And for one brief moment, it's letting you listen in.